Hello, you are welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial, we shall be looking at the configuration of network address translation NAT, and we shall be focusing on static NAT. My name is Claude Fozao, and I will be taking you through this tutorial. As an introduction, in computer networking, there are two categories of IP version 4 addresses. They are private addresses and they are public IP addresses. Private IP addresses can only be used to communicate within a private network or within an internal network of a company. For communication that has to go over internet, hosts must communicate using public IP addresses. The goal in this tutorial is to have hosts that are connected to the internet to be able to communicate with server 1. As you can see, server 1 is connected to a private network and it has a private IP address 172.16.16.1. It also has a public IP address 64.100.50.1 that is reserved for it. If hosts want to communicate on internet using private IP addresses, communication will be dropped on internet. For PC1 to communicate with server 1, PC1 has to send the communication to the public IP address of server 1. It therefore means that traffic leaving PC1 to server 1 will have the IP address of server 1 as the destination IP address, in this case 64.100.50.1. The traffic will leave PC1 with 64.100.50.1 as the destination IP address up to the router. The router would then replace the public IP address 64.100.50.1 with server's 1 private IP address before sending the traffic to server 1. If server 1 wants to send traffic to the internet, the traffic will leave server 1 with 172.16.16.1 as the source IP address. When it gets to router R1 will replace that source IP address with server's 1 public IP address, in this case 64.100.50.1, before sending the traffic to internet. R1 is connected both to the internal network and also to the internet. We are going to start first of all by testing communication between PC1 and server 1. So I will go to PC1, I go to desktop, then I'm going to open a web browser on PC1. Okay, I will type in the IP address, the private IP address of server 1 and test communication to see if it will go through. Okay, I'm testing communication. Let's see if it will go through. It doesn't go through and it says timeout. I'm going to also test communication to server's 1 public IP address. So I will type in 64.100.50.1. Let's see if the communication will go through. As you can see, the communication doesn't go through. At the end of the exercise, we are going to come back and test the communication again. We are going to start the configuration. So I get to router R1. I go to privilege XM mode using the command enable. Right now I'm in privilege XM mode. I will start by displaying router R1 interface configuration using the command show IP interface brief. As you can see, router R1 has two interfaces configured with IP addresses. Router R1 has gigabit Ethernet 0/1 with IP address 172.16.16.14. This interface is connected to the private network. Router R1 also has an interface serial 0/0/0 with IP address 209.165.128.130. This interface is connected to the internet. In order to do the configuration, we'll get into global configuration mode using the command configure terminal. Right now we are in global configuration mode. We'll start by telling the router the interface that should act as NAT inside interface, meaning the interface that is connected to the private network. For us to do this, we have to be in that interface configuration mode. We are going to configure gigabit Ethernet 0/0 as inside NAT interface. So we get into gigabit Ethernet 0/0 interface configuration mode, and we are going to type the command IP NAT inside to tell the router that this is a NAT inside interface, meaning that this interface is connected to the private network. We are also going to tell the router that interface serial 0/0 is connected to the internet or to the outside network. So we say interface serial 0/0/0. While in this mode, we will type the command IP NAT outside to tell the router that interface serial 0/0/0 is NAT outside interface, meaning that it is connected to the outside network. Okay, I will come back to global configuration mode. While in global configuration mode, I would do the configuration of static NAT itself using the command IP NAT inside source static to tell the router that I'm configuring a static NAT. I will first of all specify the private IP address of server 1. Then I will also specify its public IP address 64.100.50.1. I'm telling the router here to use this command to do translation between 172.16.16.1 and 64.100.50.1 and vice versa. As simple as that, static NAT is configured. I will save my configuration using the command copy run start. I've saved my configuration. I'm going to go back and test communication again between PC1 and the server. Okay, I will test again. Let's see. Right now the communication is successful. As you can see, it says server 1, welcome to server 1, meaning from PC1 I'm able to communicate with server 1. One more thing, we are going to test the NAT translation on the router. Let's display the NAT translation using the command IP show IP NAT translation. As you can see, there's a translation that has taken place. There is a communication with protocol TCP. It came with destination IP address 64.100.50.1. The destination TCP port was 80, and the router did a translation and replaced the public IP address with a private IP address, in this case 172.16.16.1, and did not change the destination TCP port. This is the end of the tutorial. Thank you for watching, and see you in my next video.